What's up? Today, I'm going to show you guys how to use sound color effects when you're DJing with USBs. Okay, so sound color effects, what I mean by that are those fancy filter effects you see on the left side of a mixer typically, anything that's like a Pioneer, like XDJ, CDJ model, those fancy filter effects. That's what I mean by sound color effects. So typically there's 6 sound color effects you're gonna get, and I'm just gonna run you guys through the ones that I use and the ones that are kind of pointless, as well as the parameter feature and how that can sort of change the way you're gonna use these effects and the way that I use the effects, as well as the parameters. This one should be pretty quick, so let's just get right into it. All right, so we are now in front of the XDJ here. If you look at last week's video, I kind of covered the EQ section here, so I don't know, Serge could put maybe like a photo or link somewhere to something, I don't know. Last week I covered this section right here with the black knobs and whatnot. But this week, I'm just covering this section right here. Even though it is a small section, it is very important to when you're DJing. Typically on controllers and other devices, what you're gonna see is just those standard effects on the top. What's nice about the CDJs and the XDJs and DJing on USBs, to be specific here, is that you have these frequency effects as well as your sound color effects, which are really nice. So they kind of gives you 2 different options when you're DJing. And you can actually double up these effects, which is really cool. So I just have a loop here of like a Kung's remix of Anti-Hero. So it was just the first thing that came up on the USB, so don't judge me. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you each effect, kind of what it does and what it's doing when I have the parameter at like minimum, right in the middle, and at maximum. So I'm just gonna loop this, and I'm gonna start with space so you guys can kind of first see what space does. To use these effects, you have to click on them, and then when they're blinking, that means that effect is activated. And if you click on another one, it'll obviously switch to that effect that you choose. Okay, so here's space at the lowest amount. And here is it at like 50%. And then here is space at maximum. So as you can see here, the maximum amount of space is really, really harsh. And when you're using the low pass section of the filter for these sound color effects, it kind of sounds really muddy. So I tend to favor the high side. So if you were going to use like a high pass filter, I kind of follow that rule of thumb for almost all the sound color effects. I think it sounds better. It's not as muddy. It's not going to bog things down when you're using these effects. So I tend to lean into the high side of the filter. And with the space effect, how do I want to say this?
A few moments later,
I'm only using it on the minimum right down here or at the 50%. I use that a lot with the high pass side of the sound color effects. Now the next one here, this is my bread and butter. This is the dub echo effect. You'll see people use this all the time. I'll start just with the minimum so you guys can kind of get a gist of what it is. So there's like nothing going on there. That's at 50%. For general like transitioning when you're DJing and mixing tracks, I usually will keep my parameter at 50% unless I'm doing specific with it. Especially with dub echo, I'm pretty much always leaning on this effect. I'm almost always just doing a gentle sweep with the high pass when I'm transitioning 2 tracks. It just gives you a nice, clean, kind of almost like a slapback delay is kind of what it sounds like. It's really quick, has like a tone to it, which is really nice as well. So I tend to lean on like just an even 50% on the parameter with this, with a quick high pass and then just a quick cut. And then I kind of just treat that as like a really tight slap back delay almost, and I think it's a really good effect. If you've ever heard me DJ, I use this all the time, so there's a reason for it. Next one is the sweep effect. I'm just going to go over this real quick because you are going to quickly realize why I do not use this effect, and I don't recommend anyone use this effect unless you're a dubstep or mid-tempo DJ, maybe. So this effect is literally just chopping up the audio when it's on the low pass side. And then it almost just acts like a filter on the high side. And then when you go to the maximum, it's really really something. The only time I would ever see anyone using this is if you want to start it at the maximum and then use the high pass at the highest intensity and then bring the track in that way. So you would just flick the track up. That's like the only way I would ever see anyone using this effect, unless you really just want to chop up the audio. But the reality is you could just do this. I never use this effect. You can use it if you want. I don't really see a need for it. The noise effect is very interesting. So what it does is you can create like either like a sweep effect on like the low end or on the high end. This is important, I never use this effect over top of a track. So like if I'm playing this, I am like never doing that because it sounds terrible. But what I will do is I will use it in tandem with something else. So I'll do it like just a quick transition here. I'm also going to double up with the reverb as well to help kind of make a nice sweep effect. That's the only time I'm really using it. You can use it as a low pass as well. It sounds decent. But I tend to, like I said, lean on the high pass side of things. I'm using that maybe once or twice a night, maybe. I use it, but not that much. It is cool though. Like if you want to play around with it, if you ever see like James Hype doing stuff, he plays with that a lot. He'll just flick the fader. Like he'll just do fancy stuff like that, or you could chop it up with the crossfader as well too. That's another cool thing. So if you're into turntablism, that's another thing you could do too to kind of add that like additional like showmanship to your sets, which is really cool. Oh, the good old crush effect. This is another effect just like sweep that I'm like never really using ever, and you'll hear why here. At the minimum, it does the same thing that a regular filter does, and it literally does nothing on the low side of things, so that's pointless. It's just a bit crusher is what it is. It's just a bit crusher. I think it sounds too harsh and it's weird and robotic. So same thing with sweep, unless you're like mid-tempo, dubsteppy, electronic style DJing. I don't really think there's a place for it, especially if you're like playing T-Pain at a bar. Like, why? Why would you use this? But the last one here is the filter, like just the standard filter. I like this. Honestly, this is probably one of my most used effects, just alongside of Dub Echo. It kind of runs in parallel. Minimum parameter with the filter here is what I use. And you can see why. It's super clean. There's not really like a peak, almost like in that EQ if it was a filter. Like if you think of it like, I don't know, Serge, if you can like recreate this. Probably not. It's really difficult to explain. But like on an EQ, sometimes people will like have like a bump in it just so it like sweeps a frequency and it has like a little bit of a harsher sound. That's what you hear on a lot of like standard filters on controllers. But with this, when you put it at the minimum, it kind of has just like a standard flat curve to it, which is really good. It makes a really clean and nice sound for when you're DJing. But as you go up the parameter here, you're going to start to get more of that sweeping sound. Maximum, you get like this crazy, almost like robotic filter sound. Basically, this filter sounds like you're like R2-D2 or something like that. So if you put it at the maximum and you want to sound like you're like R2-D2 communicating with someone like in a Star Wars film, that's what it's going to sound like. But that does it for me today. Hopefully you guys learned something new. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff really helps us out over here. Greatly appreciate it. And I'll be back next week with another video for you guys.